Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. We highly doubt that there's anyone out there who's not familiar with the legacy of Wolverine in the Marvel Universe. A creation of the terrific trio of Len Wein, Roy Thomas and John Romita Sr., the character first made a cameo appearance on the last page of the 180th issue of The Incredible Hulk back in October 1974. Honestly speaking, not much was known about Wolverine's early life. In fact, the mutant's origin had been a mystery for decades. It was only after the 2001 six-issue comic book limited series Origin was published that we had a fair idea about the mutant's childhood and were introduced to his family. Well, this brings us to the main content of today's video, where we'll be exploring every single member of Wolverine's extended family. Are you excited for this video? We know we are. Let's dive right into it then. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Wolverine, the man himself. You can't even pretend to not know the mutant with the retractable claws. Born as James Howlett, Wolverine's mysterious past is crammed with blood, conflict, and let's not forget treachery. His mutant powers first manifested when he shockingly witnessed his father get murdered by the groundskeeper, Thomas Logan. Boasting the rage of a beast, add superhuman acute senses to this, an exceedingly powerful regenerative healing factor, magnified physical capabilities, superhuman reflexes, psionic resistance, the soul of a samurai. And let's not forget those signature 12-inch bone claws, which are coated in adamantium post his induction into the Weapon X program. This long-lived mutant here indisputably happens to be the ultimate weapon. While there's no denying that the character rapidly emerged as a fan favorite of the highly popular X-Men franchise, Wolverine has also been portrayed as a member of the X-Force, the Fantastic Four, Alpha Flight, as well as the Avengers. Moreover, in case you didn't know, his character has even had its own comic book series from the year 1988, and since then has appeared in a multitude of X-Men adaptations. We can't wait to see him in the upcoming Deadpool 3 movie that's all set for a November 2024 release. Thomas Logan, a creation of the quartet Joe Quesada, Paul Jenkins, Bill Yemas, and Andy Kubert. The character of Thomas Logan was initially introduced in the first issue of the Origin comic, working for the Howlett estate as their groundskeeper. Besides being a severely abusive father to his son, Dog, Thomas was also a heavy drinker. With his son beginning to adopt his abusive ways and him unable to control Dog, Thomas eventually got fired from the plantation. However, with the father-son duo later breaking into the Howlett mansion and Thomas attempting to convince Elizabeth Howlett to run away with him, not only does their secret affair get revealed, but also the fact that Logan was the biological father of Wolverine. The intrusion of Elizabeth's husband, John Howlett, resulted in a heated exchange, and Thomas ended up shooting John dead. The sheer horror of his father's death triggered young James to such an extent that he had bone claws getting extended from the back of his fists, which he immediately used to kill Thomas as an act of retaliation. No wonder Wolverine grew up only to strikingly resemble Thomas Logan. While it was never really stated in the limited series that Thomas Logan was Wolverine's father, things became crystal clear in the 4th issue of Wolverine, particularly in the Wolverine Goes to Hell storyline that had Thomas Logan confirming that he was indeed Wolverine's father. Elizabeth Howlett. Say hello to Wolverine's mother, who went literally mad after her first son, John Howlett Jr., died under strange, undisclosed circumstances. This affected Elizabeth to an extent that she was sent to an asylum. Of course, things weren't the same when she came back to the Howlett estate, and Elizabeth was mostly seen keeping to herself. She also had these large parallel slashes on the side of her back, which looked like claw marks, and they were deduced to be a result of the incident with John Jr. Elizabeth wouldn't leave her room, forget talking and giving company to her younger son James. Her affair with the groundskeeper Thomas Logan was eventually revealed after the latter, upon getting expelled from the family's plantation, came back to the manor for Elizabeth and to take her away with him. This resulted in the eventual death of John Howlett at the hands of Thomas, and a shocked James revealing his own set of bone claws before attacking Thomas and lapsing into a state of complete shock. A hysterical Elizabeth, shocked to find her younger son bearing the same traits as her elder son, rejected James with disgust and even addressed him as an animal. After throwing James out of the house, she was seen cradling the body of Thomas and mourning over her lover's death, post which she killed herself by pulling the trigger of a shotgun. Later, in one of Wolverine's story arcs during which the mutant sacrifices his life so as to prevent Doom from wiping out Earth, he's reported to have met his mother in the afterlife and made peace with her. Moon Boy. A creation of Jack Kirby, Moon Boy made his debut in the first issue of the comic series titled Devil Dinosaur. Now, for those of you wondering how is this character even related to Wolverine, well, Moon Boy happens to be Wolverine's great ancestor, but for us to come to that part, here's delving a little bit into his backstory. As a member of the prehistoric Moon Clan, Moon Boy was a worshipper of the moon and sought the wisdom of the astronomical body when it was full. There came a time when the powerful cosmic beings who are known as the Celestials attempted to obscure the moon, and their actions made Moon Boy and his tribe run away and hide themselves. Now, while this meant that his tribe wasn't influenced, or should we say affected by the Celestials, and made to be a part of their experiments, the worshippers of the moon were eventually hunted down by the other human tribes. In due course, the members of the Moon Clan got reduced to a bare minimum, and they landed themselves in the Canadian wilderness. With centuries passing by, the descendants of the Moon Clan developed the strange ability of having bone claws projecting out from the back of their fists. That's not all. They even developed superhuman senses along with the accelerated healing process, one that would let them recover from any wound or disease for that matter. Do these ring a bell? Well, they should, because Wolverine, in due course, turned out to be one of Moon Boy's very own descendants. Folkburn Logan. Meet Folkburn Logan, one who happened to be yet another ancestor to Wolverine in relation and resided in London back in the 11th century. A creation of Rick Remender and Daniel Acuna, Folkburn Logan first appeared as a flashback character in the 6th issue of Uncanny Avengers back in 2013. While it is true that we don't have much information about his character, but what we do know for certain is that Folkburn was reported to be the last living pagan in London around 1013 AD. As per the storyline, Folkburn was on some guard duty against the Norse raiders when he casually made fun of his friend as the latter wasn't getting any action from his fiancée due to the sole fact that they both happened to be Catholic. Naturally, the duo started arguing, only to be ambushed by the Horsemen of Apocalypse. With Folkburn's friend dying right in front of him, Folkburn started praying, and he was indeed lucky as his prayers were answered by the timely arrival of Thor, who ended up slaying the Horsemen using the dwarven forged battle axe Jarnbjorn, one that was made up of Asgardian steel and created especially for Runia, the original member of the female demigoddesses, the Valkyries. As for Folkburn, it's insinuated that he died quite a few years later. Old Man. Also known as Old Man Howlett, this character here happens to be the grandfather of Wolverine and the father to John Howlett. While how he built the family fortune hasn't been disclosed in the comic, it was his son who ended up inheriting the entire fortune. Old Man Howlett always believed that his grandson James needed to be punished from time to time and that he needed a strong hand to bring him up. From keeping his servants disciplined to bullying the people in town, he somehow always had justification for his nasty deeds. After the very incident where his son was murdered and his daughter-in-law ended up dead too, Old Man Howlett had his grandson and his childhood friend Rose thrown out of the manor and the family fortune, especially after the duo came to him asking for help. It goes without saying that he somehow held James accountable for the incident and even mentioned that he had dealt with a similar thing before. But having said that, the solitary fact that James was related to him by blood compelled him to help his grandchild, at the end of the day by giving him some money and helping him escape from there. Over the years, it was the groundskeeper Thomas Logan's son, Dog, who ended up becoming Old Man Howlett's ward, as well as heir, but with Old Man eventually lying on his deathbed, he tried to mend his relationship with his grandchild and sent Dog to bring him back home. However, the whole thing was completely misinterpreted by Dog, who had been waiting this whole time to learn of James's location so that he could kill him. Well, it's only fitting to say that Old Man Howlett never really saw his grandson again. John Howlett Sr. While it is true that John Howlett Sr. wasn't the biological father of James, but there's no denying that he loved his son dearly and was everything that a good father possibly could be. The inheritor of the Howlett estate, unlike his father Old Man Howlett, was a good man, one who treated even the staff with respect. No wonder this led to frequent squabbles between him and his overbearing father, primarily because of their differing personalities. Now, if we're to look at the relationship between him and his wife, the death of their firstborn had a huge impact on Elizabeth. She'd neither leave her room nor make the effort of speaking to James. This highly concerned John because, as a child, James didn't keep too well. He was always sick, and then, of course, his son needed his mother. As we move ahead with this storyline, we learn that post giving a fair number of warnings to the groundskeeper Thomas Logan to keep the ladder's son under check, he was finally kicked out of the estate. But the night Thomas barged into the mansion to take Elizabeth with him was when John realized that his own wife had been having an affair behind his back with Thomas. Of course, John tried to defend his family, but that only resulted in Thomas shooting him dead with his shotgun. Elias Hudson. To begin with, we have very limited information about this character, but what we do know is that the insanely rich Elias Hudson happens to be the maternal uncle of Wolverine, a creation of Daniel Way and Doug Braithwaite. The character first appeared in the 33rd issue of Wolverine Origins back in February 2009. Taking a peek at his storyline, we learn that Elias and his brother Frederick were survivors of a shipwreck, which took away the lives of their parents. After that tragic incident, the brothers took different paths in terms of their profession. Elias ended up not only owning but also running the Hudson Bay Company. Mind you, this is where James Howlett previously worked, but Elias apparently hadn't the slightest idea about it. In fact, he didn't even know that James was his nephew back then. Eventually, with James leaving the company shortly after, Elias was reported to have taken his own life inside his very office. Frederick Hudson. After surviving the shipwreck with his brother Elias, Frederick, who also happened to be the maternal uncle of Wolverine, went on to oversee an army camp in Western Canada. A creation of Steve Dillon and Daniel Way, Frederick first made an appearance in the 14th issue of Wolverine Origins back in 2007. As per the storyline, Wolverine was reported to be undergoing training at the same camp, and of course, Frederick had no idea that he happened to be his sibling Elizabeth's son. Frederick had even gone to the whole extent of hiring the highly sadistic Silas Burr, so as to make the life of the camp recruit Wolverine, or in simpler words the life of his nephew, a living nightmare by torturing him. Now, speaking of Frederick's personal life, despite being married, he got his secretary pregnant. The secretary, known as Caitlin MacDonald, immediately named her son after his father as Frederick Hudson II, in the hopes of having Frederick's wife leave him. It was way later that Frederick was tricked by the mysterious Romulus and killed by Daken. Caitlin MacDonald. Despite being a married man, Frederick never had a child with his wife. But that clearly wasn't the case with his secretary, Caitlin MacDonald, at Hudson Bay Company, whom he managed to get pregnant. Oh, in case we haven't mentioned this to you before, Frederick co-owned Hudson Bay Company along with his brother, Elias. Anyway, coming back to Caitlin's storyline, call it an attempt to get back at her boss or have Frederick's wife leave him, she went to the extent of naming her son after his father and addressing him as Frederick Hudson II. But with Frederick refusing to leave his wife and the fact that he literally wanted nothing to do with his secretary, as well as the newborn baby, Caitlin's corpse was discovered hanging by the bedsheets out of her hospital window 2 days after she'd given birth. John Howlett. While the character of John Howlett never really made an appearance in the Origin comics, he happened to be the first son of John Howlett Sr. and Elizabeth Howlett. This naturally made him Wolverine's elder brother, who in all probability was also born a mutant. While it's true that the circumstances of John's death remain a mystery throughout the comics, the fact that Elizabeth had these huge claw-like slashes on the back of her body suggested that John had attacked his mother at some point before his death. Also, as per the dates engraved on his gravestone, John was around 12 years old when he passed away. Please know that in the comics it was also implied that Old Man Howlett was accountable for his grandson's death when the latter had attacked Elizabeth. The character's storyline was expanded in an alternate universe of Earth 4011 in Wolverine The End, which divulged that John, in a fit of rage, had attacked his mother upon discovering her affair with Thomas Logan. While he was put away in a mental asylum by his grandfather and even became one of the first Weapon X experiments, he, in the long run, became the White Ghost. John also had the eventual encounter with Wolverine where he fought his brother. With John ultimately dying in his brother's arms, he not only addressed him as Logan, but also told him that he was always proud of him. Sabretooth. First things first, Sabretooth and Dog Logan are entirely two separate characters, despite the duo's overwhelming similarities, especially in terms of looks and demeanor. So, to everyone being led to believe that they're the same, and we wouldn't really blame you for the confusion here, now you know they are two different people. Having said that, please know that there's a high possibility that the two mainstream characters were fused into a single character in the X-Men cinematic universe. Sabretooth, aka Victor Creed, has shared a century-long history with Wolverine. They've battled, they've bled, and they've healed, resorting to each other's mutant healing powers. Okay, now that we're clear with that, Sabretooth's relationship with Wolverine has varied in almost every reality. For instance, in the 161 Marvel Universe, Wolverine is established as the son of Sabretooth. If we take a look at Earth 10005, the character happens to be Wolverine's half-brother, whereas in Earth 616, he appears to be way younger than Wolverine. Further, taking a peek into Earth 1610, he happens to be Wolverine's supposed son, and in Earth 77013, he's seen addressing Wolverine as baby brother. Dog Logan. Here's a classic case of a friendship gone wrong. The son of the Howlett estate groundskeeper initially happened to be one of Wolverine's first friends, and while he at first maintained a strong and loving relationship with Wolverine and the latter's orphan companion Rose, Dog eventually started adapting his drunken father's abusive ways. In fact, there was a time when he developed feelings for Rose, but instead of exhibiting them, he forced himself on her. This was one of the primary reasons why Dog's father was fired by John Howlett Sr. The eventual revelation of Elizabeth Howlett's affair with Thomas Logan not only altered Wolverine's life trajectory, but it also did take quite a toll on Dog. A young Wolverine ended up severely scarring Dog's face when his mutant powers manifested for the first time. After the events, Dog was adopted by Old Man Howlett as his ward and heir, and he grew up on the estate. But with Howlett Sr. eventually lying on his deathbed, he attempted to make amends with his grandson, and therefore asked Dog to locate Wolverine and get him back. Dog misinterpreted things entirely, because this whole time he'd been waiting to take his revenge on Wolverine, whom he blamed completely for his father's death. So, while Dog was successful in tracking Wolverine down, he did so simply to settle scores with him. What ensued was a battle between the two, which tragically ended on Wolverine's part with him accidentally killing Rose in the process. Silver Fox, a creation of Christopher S. Claremont and John Buscema. Silver Fox initially appeared as a former love interest of Wolverine, having lived with him in Canada. While her character was apparently murdered by Sabretooth, it was later disclosed that she wasn't only alive, but also happened to be a member of the Team X. Fox, in due course, betrayed Team X only to become an agent of the subversive international terrorist organization Hydra. Fox continued keeping a track of Wolverine and monitored his quest for answers about the Weapon X program. She even killed the scientist who was in charge of the program to prevent him from interfering. Years later, when a former member of the Weapon X program died after rapidly aging, Fox reunited with Wolverine and Group to look for answers, with them infiltrating a secret base and confronting Aldo Ferro, the one responsible for implanting them with false memories. The confrontation led to Sabretooth killing Fox. As for Wolverine, he had Fox buried in the cabin that the duo happily lived in years ago. In the alternate universe, Earth 717, Fox appeared as Wolverine's wife and the duo even had a son together. But unfortunately, Fox and the unnamed son were killed by Dog Logan, who would then become the crime lord known as Scarface, and his actions ultimately prompted Wolverine in becoming the Punisher. Jean Grey. While there's certainly no denying that the X-Men movies did touch upon the complicated relationship between Wolverine and Jean Grey, the comics were the ones that explored the duo's relationship, and in much greater detail, may we add. Full credits to different timelines that the comics had on display, which ultimately brought Jean Grey and Wolverine way closer than anybody could have ever imagined. In the Earth X timeline, they ended up as this archetypal sitcom couple. Now, when we say archetypal, we like to put stress on Wolverine sitting right in front of a television and ordering Jeannie for another beer. While it's hard to imagine the duo like this and not in their superhero form, it is what it is. In an altogether separate timeline, Jean not only gets married to Wolverine, but they also have a daughter together named Kate. Mystique. In the Earth 13729 timeline, Charles Xavier was not the only one that the shape-shifting mutant Raven Darkholme, otherwise known as Mystique, had a son with. It's a different thing that she gave away Charles Xavier II right at birth and she felt she wasn't fit enough to raise him. It was only after some time that Mystique ended up having another son, but this time with Wolverine. However, her mutant son with Wolverine eventually grew up to loathe his mother. So much so, for reasons unknown, he ended up killing his mother and even went to the whole extent of replacing her without letting anyone know about it. Storm. If the idea of Wolverine and Storm together as a couple comes as a shock to you, wait till you hear that on Earth 9811, Storm actually has 2 kids with Wolverine. As per the storyline, Storm was part of the Secret Wars heroes, who ended up getting trapped on Beyonder's patchwork planet Battleworld after the death of Reed Richards at the hands of a supervillain. With the superheroes and supervillains eventually making peace amongst them, everybody in due course settled themselves there. This brings us to Storm, who not only ended up getting married to Wolverine, but she also had a daughter and a son with him. While we don't have much information on the duo's unnamed mutant son, the daughter was blessed with both the powers of her parents. This means not only did she have the ability to control the weather like her mother, but she also had this healing factor like her father. Dr. Sarah Kinney. When the highly classified organization known as the Facility tried to recreate Weapon X, they mostly failed to lay their hands on a test subject, one that would be able to survive the extreme bonding process of adamantium to their skeleton. Naturally, they decided to change the course of their project, and the head of the facility, Dr. Martin Sutter, ended up hiring the well-known geneticist Dr. Sarah Kinney, who told the facility that she could give them what they desired through the process of cloning. But Sarah's attempts at creating a clone of Wolverine roughly hit a dead end when she came to a realization that the genetic sample that they'd recovered from Weapon X was greatly damaged. With Sarah proposing that they create a female clone, her request was then and there denied, but nonetheless, she decided to go ahead and created a viable female subject behind their backs. As revenge for her acts of defiance, the surgical head of the project, Dr. Xander Rice, coerces Sarah to act as the surrogate mother of the clone, and 9 months later, X-23 was born. Garg. Post an assassination attempt on Wolverine, the mutant had come to the prehistoric, hidden savage land while looking for the perpetrator. When flying over the densely tropical land, Wolverine misplaced his lighter, which came under the possession of the local tribe of fire, the latter thinking that the device was a gift from the gods. Of course, Wolverine arrived there to get his lighter back, and when he came, his presence startled the tribe to an extent that the tribal leader, Garg, challenged him in a duel. Now, Garg, who was actually a female, not only hid herself well in her attire, but also proved herself to be a tough contender. But despite that, Wolverine managed to gain victory. As a result, Garg was removed from her position in the tribe, Wolverine was made the new tribal clan leader, and as for Garg, she offered herself to the new leader, finally revealing her true identity as a female, and with time, she slept with Wolverine, thereby giving birth to their son, Arista. Itsu Akihiro was from Japan and met Wolverine when the latter was sent by his teacher, Ogun Rai, to her village with the sole purpose of enhancing his training. Now, it goes without saying that Wolverine and Itsu fell in love and they eventually got married. It was soon after that Itsu informed Wolverine that she was carrying his child. As an act of celebration, the entire village arranged a ritualistic ceremony, one that would ultimately prove Wolverine as the true master ninja. Now, there's no denying that Wolverine was conclusively one of the best fighters in the village, and he almost had the ceremony in his favor, but with a sudden explosion on the mountain, he ended up inadvertently stabbing one of the ninjas who was testing him with his bone claws. This naturally had him embarrassed and wanted to leave the village immediately, but of course not without bidding goodbye to Itsu. Wolverine arrived at Itsu's house with the intention of telling her that he'd only return to her when he was worthy enough to be a father and a husband, only to find his wife murdered and their unborn son torn from his mother's womb as a result of the brainwashed Winter Soldier's actions. Mariko Yoshida. Often addressed as Wolverine's one true love, Wolverine first met Mariko at the latter's cousin Sunfire's estate garden, where the X-Men had put up when they wound up in Japan while attempting to get home from the Savage Lands. Finding himself immediately attracted toward Mariko, Wolverine introduced himself to her as Logan. It's only fair to say that what followed was the duo indulging themselves in quite a romantic relationship. In fact, they were going to get married, but after Mariko was poisoned, she begged Wolverine to kill her and prevent her from facing a painful death. No points for guessing, Wolverine mercy killed her, and Mariko died in the arms of the man whom she loved dearly. Also, if we take a look at Earth 172, Earth 295, and Earth 1298, Mariko appears to be Wolverine's wife, as well as the mother to his children, Kirika, Brian, and Mari. Sylvie Darkness. While it's true that the daughter of the sorceress Marie Darkness wasn't directly related to Wolverine, but there's no denying that the latter did have his responsibility of protecting Sylvie, which led him to spend a considerable period of time with her. A peek into the storyline reveals that Marie was a French sorceress during the Second World War who was approached by the armed forces of Nazi Germany to keep up her promise of delivering them a weapon that would be in their favor during the war. While Marie initially denied meeting the terms, the Nazis put her daughter Sylvie's life at risk, and this eventually made her resort to her magical abilities and summon the demon Truth to the physical realm. While the energies of the summoning were powerful enough to kill both the units of the German and the Canadian army, it failed to have an impact on Wolverine, who was fighting the battle in favor of the Canadian army. Marie was able to send the demon back, but doing so sucked her life energy. Before dying, Marie gave Wolverine the responsibility of keeping a watch on her daughter, as the demon would come back every 10 years to the land of the living, and that the only person capable of stopping the demon would be Sylvie. While the duo of Sylvie and Wolverine continued to meet once in every 10 years because of the demon Truth, Sylvie, in due course, realized that she craved for more encounters with Wolverine. This had her teleport Wolverine to Paris, where the duo got intimate with each other, but then went their separate ways. It was way later that Wolverine, along with the readers, came to know that Sylvie's child, Reine de Rien, was in reality a result of the duo's intimate encounter in Paris. Carol Danvers. In the alternate reality of Earth 5700, Carol Danvers happened to be the wife of Wolverine. Well, as per the events of this reality, Carol was reported to have joined forces with the mutants, especially against their tormentors. The persecutors in this case happened to be the artificially intelligent robots who were created with the sole purpose of hunting the mutants. In other words, we're stressing on the Sentinels here. After having joined Wolverine's third incarnation of the X-Men, Carol married him at some point. However, her character was reported to have died later, and while the reason hasn't been cited, it's mostly presumed that she died at the hands of the Sentinels. Elektra Natchios. In the alternate reality of Earth 982, the character of Elektra ends up marrying Wolverine and they have a daughter together. For those of you wondering who their daughter is, she happens to be none other than Rena Logan, who's more famously known as Wild Thing. It's true, we don't have much information on Elektra's life other than the fact that she was extremely wealthy, that she was very actively involved in raising her daughter, and that she was the one to have trained martial arts to Spider-Girl. Viper. Ever heard of the phrase, tit for tat? Well, the relationship between Wolverine and Viper perfectly sums up that phrase. As per the duo storyline, there was a time when Viper had reminded Wolverine of his debt to their mutual mentor, Seraph, which basically had Wolverine pledge his loyalty to Viper. No points for guessing Viper asked him to marry her, and Wolverine agreed to do so following his honorable debt. But don't you worry, it didn't take Viper much time to become Wolverine's ex-wife at all, because the mutant in due course made Viper divorce him. Red Sonja. In the alternate reality of Earth 90816, Wolverine was sent back to Conan's time in the Hyborian Age. It was in Arcadia, one of the southernmost city-states of Shem, that Wolverine crossed paths with both Red Sonja and Caranthes, the latter happening to be a priest of the Ibis Temple. Now it so happened that Caranthes' rival, the evil wizard Zucala, blamed him for taking away his position as King Sumbai's counselor. No wonder he wanted to exact revenge on Caranthes, and he was ready to go to extreme lengths for that. Just imagine Zucala reaching out to Conan and telling him that he'd end up bringing Conan's beloved Beylit back to life in exchange for the life of Caranthes. Naturally, when Conan kidnaps Caranthes, Red Sonja and Wolverine teamed up to save the priest, only for Conan to defeat Red Sonja and bring her to Zucala as well. The evil wizard had plans of sacrificing Red Sonja too, but he was unable to do so with the timely intervention of Wolverine. Post getting saved by Wolverine, Red Sonja not only fell in love with him, but also became his wife later. Maureen Logan. Please know that we have very limited information about Maureen and we're stressing on 50 years into the future. Maureen grew up near the Canadian border whilst making the old Weapon X facility as her home. This is where she met Wolverine, with whom she fell in love, got married and also had 2 children, Scotty and Jade. Upon delving deeper into the storyline, we find the family constantly being threatened to pay the house rent by the Hulk gang. They'd occasionally turn up at the house and then gang up on Wolverine for his inability to pay the rent on time. The story took a rather tragic and dark turn, with Wolverine returning home one day with the money, only to find Maureen along with the kids murdered by the Hulk gang simply because they got bored. Heather McDaniel Hudson. Meet the woman who made a deal with Tanarak, one of the gods of the Elder Night. Naturally, this allowed her to transform into the legendary creature, one that's popularly known as the Sasquatch. Heather's new abilities made her eventually join the Canadian super team Alpha Flight. That's how she not only met Wolverine, but also ended up getting married to him. With Alpha Flight becoming a major force throughout the world, things took an ugly turn. After a certain chip in Wolverine's adrenal gland was triggered, he went all batshit crazy. While Heather tried her best to control him, she was unable to do so, and with things getting out of hand, she was left with no other choice but to kill her own husband. Dolores Downing. Oh boy, this list is only getting longer. Say hello to one of the several women Wolverine fell in love with, and unbeknownst to him, she'd also given birth to his son, William Downing, more popularly known as Gunhawk. Dolores was Canadian, and truth be told, apart from the fact that she had a child with Wolverine, nothing more is known about the relationship between her and Wolverine. Dolores raised her son and both took care of each other until she died later due to old age. Wolverina. It's true, X-23 has more than often been credited with being the first female counterpart to Wolverine, but when it comes to the character of Wolverina, it's only fitting to address her as the original female Wolverine, an invention of Rorik Tyler and Scott Lobdell. Wolverina was introduced as the busty waitress at Bud Suds and eventually turned out to be the cousin of Wolverine. The character is seen having on display 3 retractable claws which come out from the back of her fists, 5 more than her fingertips, as well as the regenerative healing factor, which lets her redevelop damaged tissues in her body way more rapidly and extensively than an otherwise normal human being is capable of doing. X-23. We've already gone through how X-23 was born. For those who missed, X-23 happens to be a result of the Weapon X program. She was born from a highly damaged genetic sample of Wolverine, and add to this geneticist Sarah Kinney acting as her surrogate mother in the process. Bred in captivity, X-23 was entirely trained to be a weapon, and it was at the tender age of 7 that X-23 became highly trained in martial arts. She was subjected to so many forms of abuse that she lost all sense of self and humanity. Imagine accelerating the activation of her mutant gene by having her subjected to radiation poisoning. She was only 11 years old when she was first sent on a mission, one that required her to kill a presidential candidate. It was Sarah who helped X-23 escape from the facility and even named her Laura at the cost of her own life. With X-23 finally wishing to put an end to weapons like herself, she tracked down Wolverine to the X-Mansion with the sole purpose of killing him. But her mission took a different turn when Wolverine offered to help her out and had her registered at the Xavier Institute. X-23 since has been an important member of the mutant community. Daken. Do you remember us telling you how Itsu Akihiro during her final stages of pregnancy was murdered by the brainwashed Winter Soldier? As for the baby, he was literally ripped from his mother's womb. To everyone wondering how did the baby survive, well, Daken did so mainly because of the healing ability that he inherited from his father, Wolverine. Daken, after his mother's murder, was left on the doorstep of a wealthy Japanese couple who didn't have any children. They took in Daken and began to raise him as their own. While Daken dearly loved his adopted father, Akihira, he often received harsh treatment from his adoptive mother, Natsumi. So much so that things escalated to a level where Natsumi triggered Daken's mutant ability and he ended up killing her. As for Akihira, he was unable to force himself to hurt Daken and he ended up committing suicide. Daken often blamed Wolverine for abandoning him, for his mother's death, and let's not disregard his extremely traumatic childhood. No wonder he sought revenge against Wolverine. Not only did he become a member of the Dark Avengers and the Brotherhood of Mutants, he even went to the whole extent of becoming a Horseman of Death. It was years later, after his stints as a supervillain, that he reformed himself as a superhero, reconciled with his father, and eventually earned the title of Fang, primarily for his acts of heroism. Raze. The mutant son of Mystique and Wolverine grew up hating his mother to such an extent that he not only killed her, but also posed her for a while after that using his shape-shifting abilities, and one doesn't really know the exact reasons for his action. Reyes was eventually located by his half-brother, Charles Xavier II, one who happened to be the son of Mystique and Charles Xavier. Apparently, Charles Xavier II also had plans of tracking down Mystique and harming her, as Mystique had given him away right at birth after she felt that she wasn't ready to raise him. The two brothers, upon discovering that they were connected to each other, made up their minds to work together. And if you ask us, that's exactly how the future Brotherhood was formed. Reign de Rien. Rien was conceived as a result of an intimate encounter that sorceress Sylvie Darkness indulged in with Wolverine back in Paris. Naturally, as the duo's daughter, Rien not only possessed magical abilities, but also mutant powers, such as the regenerative healing factor and the retractable bone claws, which mysteriously had this blue glow when projected. The fact that she was also a member of the clan Darkness gave her the ability to do sorcery as well as create portals. Rina, aka Wild Thing. Let's be clear on one thing right away. The daughter of Elektra Natchios and Wolverine happens to be both dangerous and unstoppable, like her father, and is also a highly skilled ninja, like her mother. While her life began just like a regular girl attending high school, the popular girls at her school attempted to create unnecessary drama in her life, calling her an outcast. But things changed when Wolverine came to pick his daughter up from school, and with everybody learning who her mother was. Now, speaking of Rina's parents, they may have retired from their superhero life, but unbeknownst to them, Rina had her own secret identity too. Wild Child. It's only fitting to state that trouble followed the young lady everywhere. She's had a horde of high school adventures, which includes rescuing her classmate from a high-speed kidnapper, thwarting the plans of a demonic invader, destroying a computerized assassin, and let's not forget her dealing with a prime sentinel for that matter, and all under the guise of her secret identity. Also, there was this one time when Loki had kidnapped Wolverine, and had it not been for the enhanced senses of Wild Thing, she wouldn't have been able to locate her father. Torrent. Sorry for the incoming recap that's bound to shock you again. Meet Kendall Logan, popularly known as Torrent, who happens to be the very daughter of Storm and Wolverine. So, the storyline has Storm settling down with Wolverine on Beyonder's patchwork planet Battleworld, and having children with him. Their daughter, who also happens to be a mutant, has the power to influence the weather, just like her mother, and the healing factor, like her father. Other than that, she also has this psychic bond that she's been able to establish between herself and the primal life force of Earth's ecosphere. This gives her an empathic sense towards things that have life, and she's also capable of detecting the life force of literally any living being for that matter. It's also pretty cool given that Torrent sees the entire physical world around her as energy. She's super fast, she can breathe at any speed, and she also has this immunity towards Hudson Logan, aka Saberclaw. While it's never revealed who Saberclaw's mother is, we do know that Hudson Logan is Wolverine's son, as well as the half-brother of Rina Logan, who's more popularly known as Wild Child. Initially, as a member of the Revengers, his mission was to infiltrate the Avengers mansion and take down the Avengers, but the superhero team eventually gained an advantage over the Revengers thanks to the aid of numerous allies. As time passed, Saberclaw switched sides and helped out the Avengers to prevent Galactus from attacking them. No wonder he wanted to join the Avengers and even requested them to let him become a member. It's true that the Avengers were initially a bit suspicious of Saberclaw and his motives, but they eventually ended up accepting him as a member to aid them in a battle against Loki's daughter, Silene. Jimmy Hudson. Jimmy Hudson is the offspring of the Witch and Wolverine. James Hudson and the Wolverine participated side by side in the war in Iraq, and eventually Wolverine gave James the responsibility of taking care of his son. Jimmy's surname was changed to Hudson so as to officialize the adoption. The circumstances of Jimmy's birth were kept a secret until he reached high school. Jimmy didn't know that he was a mutant while growing up, and lived in denial of the fact too. Similarities could be seen with his father in that he also grew up with a taste in red-haired females, was a reckless individual, and had an unhinged personality. He has a strong regenerative capacity. He's capable of resisting telepathy via his healing prowess. Of course, the classic retractable claws cannot be overlooked as well. He's also capable of covering his entire skeleton with pure metal. The Mongrels. It's well known that throughout his life, the Wolverine has come across many women whom he fell in love with, and consequently fathered many children. At one point, one of his kids, named Dakin, had discovered these other children. Dakin then later created a villainous organization for these kids, who wanted to seek vengeance against Wolverine. The organization was called the Red Right Hand. They were trained to use their powers against Logan, but they also knew they wouldn't be able to outshine him. These kids were eventually named the Mongrels. Their main aim was to inflict as much pain and torture on Logan and his near and dear ones. Some of the main members of this team were Gunhawk, Cannonfoot, Fire Knives, Sawfist, Shadow Stalker, and so on. Kirika Yoshida. In this universe of Earth 295, Logan, aka Weapon X, had a child with Mariko Yoshida. Logan wasn't aware of this daughter of his. After the downfall of Japan due to apocalypse, Kirika was taken under the custody of Sinister, an evil scientist. Kirika was discovered in an old container in a lab run by Sinister and was marked as X-23 by the X-Men. They then noticed that she was able to retract her claws, which made them realize she was connected to their old colleague. The X-Men invited her to join the squad and was taken under Magneto's wing, who taught and trained her. She was later sent to find Logan and convince him to join the X-Men again. She aids Logan in multiple battles in a true father-daughter fashion, and later returns to Japan after learning about her origins so as to be with her mother. She has incredible tracking skills and has the trademark claws as weapons. Kate Howlett. Catherine Howlett is the biological offspring of Jean Grey and Wolverine, who goes under the alias Shine. She's a happy, carefree, and jolly kid. She has a few powers such as psychic projection, through which she can create and control light psychically, which helps her uncover memories or block others' minds. She sometimes uses this to produce strong blasts of energy, too. Arista. Wolverine fathered a child with Gark, who was the head of the tribe of Fire, which consisted of hunter-gatherers. Wolverine went to the Savage Land on account of tracking an individual who attempted to assassinate him. How he comes across this tribe is quite comical, as he drops his lighter while flying over this region, and the tribe assumed that the gods had gifted them. He goes back to collect his lighter, and then meets the tribe. The tribe are surprised to see an outsider like him. So, to make sure if he was a demon or some other kind of entity, Gark challenged Wolverine to a fight, which he eventually won. Gark then presented herself to Wolverine, and also gave up her position in the tribe. No one was able to believe his origin, and eventually Logan and Gark gave birth to a baby boy named Arista. Jade and Scotty Logan. Scotty Logan is the child of Logan and Maureen, and he has a sister named Jade. He's noted to be Logan's son 50 years down the line. Scotty is shown to be a relentless kid who was always up to the task when it came to protecting and fighting for his father against the notorious Hulk gang, to whom they owed money. However, the gang eventually kills the entire family. Jade was your regular daughter, who loved her family and stuck by them at all times. Brian and Mari Logan. In Earth 1298, Brian and Mari Logan are the son and daughter of Logan and Mariko Yoshida. They have very brief appearances in the comics, hence there's not much to be said about these siblings. Cohen. Cohen is a teenage cloned version of Wolverine, made by a secret organization intending to kill Wolverine himself, as they thought Wolverine was the missing puzzle piece that could help them create and sustain the most ideal civilization of people. However, Cohen decided to assist Logan and help navigate away from this planet that they found themselves stranded in. His attributes are similar to that of Wolverine, obviously being a clone. Hulk Jr. He's the child of Hulk, but belonging to another reality. He was raised by Wolverine from another storyline. As mentioned previously, the Hulk gang had killed Logan's family, and as revenge, Logan killed everyone in the gang but Hulk Jr., who was the only survivor. He decided to raise Hulk Jr. as his own kid and make a hero of him. Hulk Jr. eventually became a member of the New Avengers. He's a fantastic scientist, just like his dad. In fact, his form using the gamma radiation only limited his true potential. Amiko Kobayashi. Amiko's mother was killed by a monstrous dragon, whose release into this world could be partially traced to Wolverine. On her deathbed, she asked Wolverine to take care of her daughter, Amiko. But since Wolverine was fully occupied as being an X-Man, he entrusted her welfare to his fiancée, Mariko Yoshida. She has the capacity to produce mystical powers. She also has some prior martial arts training. Cameron Pride. Cameron Pride is the child of Peter Rasputin and Kate Pride. He's basically Wolverine's adopted son in one of the battle worlds. He was born before the Mutant Control Act, which forced all active mutants to be under the custody of Baron Robert Kelly. Kate was abducted by the Sentinels, and Logan came to the rescue of her son and raised Cameron as his own. Logan never disclosed the truth about his parents to him. Talon. Talon is the father of Wolverine's great-great-great-great-grandson on Earth 691. He was part of the Inhumans, who were a slave race in the 31st century. He achieved freedom by being under the mentorship of the Sorcerer Supreme at the time, Krugar. He has a wide range of powers. As he's an Inhuman, his attributes are incredibly superhuman. He has the capacity to lift close to 10 tons. He has crazy speed, too. His body is more efficient and functioning than a normal human. His muscles don't produce as many toxins as humans do, and hence it renders him very durable and having very high stamina. He can handle heavy impacts and forces inflicted upon him. Coupled with these are his agility and reflexes. His claws and fangs are very versatile. He can use them during melee but also shoot them at his enemies, hence his name. Rancor. Rancor is the great-great-great-granddaughter of Wolverine. She was born in the 30th century in the future of the Guardians of the Galaxy. She headed her own community of mutants on Haven. She possesses various superhuman abilities, obviously similar to Wolverine. One of Rancor's main abilities is her sped-up healing and regeneration, which helps her restore her muscles and tissues with great speed. She's also mostly immune to any diseases that exist. She also has a long lifespan due to this power. Her senses are very finely tuned and operate at a high efficiency. She can see objects that are very far away in great clarity. Same goes for her sense of smell and hearing. Her strength is an obvious advantage, with it being nearly superhuman. Her agility and stamina are equally incredible. Logan. Logan is the great-great-great-great-grandson of Wolverine. Logan's parents are Rancor and Talon. Logan was conceived through a grim circumstance when Rancor raped Talon. In the storyline, his appearances aren't many, and there isn't much of a substance to be mentioned about him. Deborah Kinney. Deborah Kinney is the aunt to X-23. She has a sister, Sarah Kinney. They were abandoned after Ron, their abusive father, exploited Sarah as a kid, who was never brought to justice after the police denied the allegations as Deborah and her mother didn't back her. It's seen that years later down the line, Debbie apologizes to Sarah for not supporting her back then when she was abused. A year after Sarah had passed away, X-23, going by the name Laura, moved in with Debbie and her boyfriend. Her boyfriend Desmond was actually an undercover facility agent who was out to kill Debbie. Eventually, X-23 kills Desmond, and later X-23 helps Debbie fight other enemies and protects them. Megan Kinney. Megan is the daughter of Deborah Kinney. When Megan was younger, she was fond of her Aunt Sarah and would often send her drawings and paintings. Megan was kidnapped by a pedophile and was rescued by her Aunt Sarah along with X-23, who was a clone of Logan's. After escaping the clutches of the abductor, Sarah drugged Megan so that she would forget all that had happened. This had an adverse effect, as no one seemed to believe that she was kidnapped. This made her develop a weird attraction to the event of her kidnapping, seen via her frequent drawings of it. After a series of attacks on their family via Desmond, Debbie's boyfriend, as mentioned before, X-23 helps both Debbie and Megan escape and take on new identities, with Megan now going by the name of Elizabeth Victoria. Ronald and Leslie Kinney. Ronald, also called Ron, was the father of Sarah and Debbie, and by extension, Laura's grandfather. Not much is known about him, but he used to abuse Sarah when she was a child. Leslie is Ron's wife, who took Ron's side when he abused Sarah and didn't back Sarah when she told the police. Zelda. Zelda was among the clones of Wolverine that were produced by Alchemax. The supervisors were Captain Mooney and Robert Chandler. Zelda was often abused by her handlers. Zelda was the automatic leader, as she was the oldest among all the clones. She doesn't experience pain due to certain implants inside her, which were actually detrimental to her. Zelda is very practical in her dealings, and her main objective was to keep her clone sisters protected at all times. Bellona. Bellona is among the clones of X-23, created by Alchemax. She was rebellious in nature and fought against her abusive creators and handlers. Although Laura's genetic material was used to create Bellona, she didn't have many of her characteristics. She's super violent and hot-headed compared to the rest of her clone sisters. Her first instinct in any fight situation is to kill or shoot. However, this stems from a deep love that she harbors for her sisters, always wanting to protect them as much as she can. She's never seen smiling, except for the one instance when she's cured of the nanites by Zelda. Gabby Kinney, aka Honey Badger. Scout. Gabby is another clone of X-23 created by the evil Alchemax genetics. She also has a similar background as those of her sisters, Bellona and Zelda. The three of them plan to take down Alchemax in a grand master plan, with Gabby finally refusing to kill the director Mooney because of her moral compass instilled in her by Bellona and Zelda. After this event, she stayed with X-23, and then finally decided that she would stay with Laura permanently. She was protected largely by her older sisters, so she came off less scathed than the rest of them. She was blindly trusting and very gullible as well. She has powers similar to that of Laura and Logan, obviously. The regeneration, bone claws, insensitivity to pain, and high-functioning senses are the usual powers that she's inherited herself. 6 more sisters, X-23 3-par. The sisters were 10 clones of Laura Kinney, created by Alchemax genetics using samples of her DNA. 6 of them died via Alchemax's missions, and a few others dying under mysterious circumstances in their holdings. One of the clones, X-23_par, died almost as soon as she was made, hence there isn't much known about her and her characteristics. Each of the sisters adorned different masks so as to hide themselves uniquely. It's also interesting to note that the sisters are a manifestation of different phases of Laura's life. Zelda represents Laura's calmness in the event of danger. Bellona stands for her impulsive rage, 3-par shows her willpower, and Gabby is a reflection of Laura's missing innocence. X666. X666 was an antithesis created by Mephisto's son, Blackheart. She's literally an inverted version of Laura. A relentless killer inside, but also a blonde, purely American girl on the surface gives her two sides to herself. X666 and X23 briefly have an encounter as Laura sets off to defeat Blackheart. She doesn't have any powers that resemble that of X23's, but instead she has razor-like pom-poms as her weapons. Akihiro. Akihiro is Darkin's adopted father. After Wolverine's son was cut open and taken away by Romulus from his mother's womb, Romulus left the baby with Natsumi and Akihiro, an affluent Japanese couple. They raised him as their own son as they thought that the baby was a gift from the gods. He was named Akiro, although the people in the surrounding society referred to the kid as Darkin, which translates to bastard dog in Japanese. He was bullied by people as he was growing up, which resulted in Akihiro becoming a closed-off, shrewd person, but he was considerate of his father. Akihiro ended up killing himself at one point as he found out his adopted son had killed his actual son that Natsumi was mothering, since Natsumi couldn't bring herself to properly love Darkin. Victor Hudson. Victor Hudson is the son of Bernice, who raised him on her own. He was born blind and mute. Later, Romulus took Victor under his supervision and eventually became his henchman. He was easy to manipulate, owing to his disabilities. He later encounters Wolverine, but is killed by him, despite Hudson possessing an incredible amount of strength. The Professor. The Professor is a cousin of Wolverine's, and his real name is Truett Hudson. He oversaw the creation of Weapon X, which is the adamantium-fortified Wolverine. When Experiment X goes wrong, he finds himself blaming his secretive superiors, which leads him to get his hands cut off. He's highly intellectual and skilled at genetic manipulation. Guardian. James MacDonald Hudson, aka the Guardian, was the original founder of the group going by the name Alpha Flight. He initially worked for an oil rig company named Amcan, which provided him with a suit that facilitated underground oil collection. He later finds out that this suit has other powerful uses and was to be used by his superior, Jerome Jackson. Hudson left the company and decided to keep the suit to himself. After encountering the X-Man, Hudson took on the persona of Vindicator. The suit provides him with powers such as extreme agility, electric control, energy manipulation, flight, magnetism, etc. Heather McNeil Hudson. Heather Hudson is the wife of James Hudson. As mentioned above, Heather started working at the young age of 17 so as to help her family out. She worked as a secretary at the Amcan Oil Company under Jerome. After James's supposed death during a battle between Omega Flight, a team headed by Jerome himself, Heather takes on the mantle of being the leader of Alpha Flight. Heather is shown to have incredible combat skills. Once her husband is found to have returned, she and him switch names and she becomes the Vindicator, and James becomes the Guardian again. Claire Hudson. Claire is the daughter of Heather and James Hudson. She became an orphan at a young age after her parents had died and was adopted by other relatives. Once her parents came back to life, there were legal duties for the Hudsons in obtaining Claire. Natsumi. Natsumi is the wife of Akira, as previously mentioned. She's killed by their adopted son, Darkin. Not much is to say about her, and she has few appearances in the storylines. Avery Connor. Avery Connor is a genetic mutation created by her own parents, Daniel and Veronica Connor, who used Wolverine's adamantium-infused DNA and implanted it into her. She was created in such a way that her powers wouldn't be functioning until a specific age, but once it did, it'd be even more stronger than Wolverine himself. Park. Park is a North Korean prisoner who was infused with Wolverine's DNA and tissue from Deadpool, which ultimately became an experiment gone awry. He appears in a few issues in the storyline. Bernice. Bernice is the mother of Victor, as mentioned previously. She kills herself as she thinks that the devil has abducted her child. Bud. Budster, aka Bud, is the father of Wolverine's cousin on Earth, 89923. There's not much substantial about him, but that he owned a bar that was often visited by superheroes. Callie. Callie is the pet dog that was given to Wolverine by his father as an Xmas, pun intended. Nevertheless, Callie is killed by dog. Batwing. Batwing is the cousin of Rancor. He was a sadistic, relentless murderer. Not confirmed whether he has genetic links to Wolverine. He uses his power of flight and electrokinesis to defeat his enemies. Nikki Doyle. Nikki is Wolverine's granddaughter in the universe Earth 8410. She goes under the alias Wild Thing. Her aim was to battle a drug that was apparently more addictive than any street or hard drugs at the time. Her powers are interesting, such as technopathy, wherein she can enter other virtual realities or games, including the cyberspace itself, and manipulate it according to her will. She was tethered to her reality, so that if things got out of control, she could be pulled back in. Marvelous verdict? Well, with this we finally come to the end of our video here. So, who amongst the ones mentioned in the list happens to be your personal favorite? And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.